Imagine two people starting the same day. Same hours, same tools, same coffee. By night, one is sprinting past goals while the other drowns in tabs and to-dos. What changed? Not talent, not luck. How they worked. Welcome to Smarter, Faster, Better. This isn't about squeezing more minutes. It's about upgrading how your brain and your team make those minutes matter. Charles Duhigg pulls lessons from Marines, Google, airline cockpits, and Pixar story rooms. High pressure, high stakes. Patterns appear. The best performers don't grind harder, they steer better. In this video, we'll unlock a simple three-part system. First, build your personal productivity engine. Then, turn any group into a winning team. Finally, make smarter decisions and learn at warp speed. But let's start where momentum begins, you. Because productivity isn't a personality trait. It's a sequence of tiny levers you can pull today. Here's the shift. Motivation isn't a mood, it's a decision. Focus isn't willpower, it's a mental model. Goals aren't wishes, they're ladders you climb one rung at a time. You'll learn a fast trigger that sparks drive on command, a quick rehearsal that protects your attention when chaos hits, and a goal recipe that blends stretch vision with smart steps so progress becomes inevitable. Keep watching with one question in your mind. What's my next deliberate choice? All right, let's roll up sleeves and install the operating system for your day. Section 1. Build your personal productivity engine. If there's one reassuring message in Smarter, Faster, Better, it's this. Productivity isn't a personality type you were born with. It's a set of habits, learned, practiced, and adjusted over time. Duhigg starts with motivation, and he treats it less like a spark and more like a decision. In the book, the people who keep moving, Marines in training, top performers under pressure, do something subtle but powerful. They claim a bit of control, even when the situation feels fixed. They turn "I have to" into "I choose to." That small shift wakes up what psychologists call a sense of agency. When you frame a task as a choice, you give your brain a reason to engage. That doesn't mean pretending everything is exciting. It just means finding a lever of autonomy inside the task. Duhigg shows that when people connect a mundane step to a personal value, learning, helping, finishing what they start, motivation strengthens. You can ask, why does this matter to me right now? And answer honestly, because it supports a skill you're building, a promise you made, or a future you care about. In the book stories, the most resilient performers repeatedly locate that meaning and then take one deliberate action. The action fuels the next one. Momentum is built, not found. Once motivation is awake, the next challenge is focus. Duhigg spends time on how attention collapses under stress, what he calls cognitive tunneling. When alarms go off or the inbox explodes, we fixate on the nearest stimulus and stop scanning the bigger picture. The antidote he highlights is the mental model, a quick narrative in your head about what you expect to happen and how you'll respond if it doesn't. Pilots do this. Elite teams do this. You can do it in 1 minute before you start. Here's my aim. Here's what good looks like. If X pops up, I'll handle it by doing Y. It sounds simple, but this rehearsal gives your attention a map. When surprises arrive, as they always do, you don't freeze. You consult the story you already wrote and keep moving. Duhigg also notes that focus isn't just about blocking distractions. It's about choosing where to point your mind. People who perform well generate their own cues. They ask small, directing questions, like, what's the next meaningful step? And they keep answering those questions through the day. That's not willpower, that's strategy. You're instructing your brain to prioritize the signal over the noise. Then comes the piece most of us recognize but often misuse: goals. According to Duhigg, a single kind of goal isn't enough. If you only have stretch goals, the big, inspiring outcomes, work can feel heroic but vague. If you only have SMART goals, the concrete, measurable steps, work can become busy but aimless. The solution is to pair them. The stretch goal sets direction and meaning. The SMART goals translate that meaning into immediate, tractable actions. In the book, organizations that consistently execute don't choose between vision and checklists, they weave both together. Think of it as two altitudes. At the top, you articulate the outcome that would genuinely matter to you: finish the degree, ship the portfolio, save an emergency fund, lead a smoother team sprint. At the ground level, you specify what today and this week look like in numbers and behaviors. Duhigg emphasizes how this pairing prevents two common traps: paralysis, big dream, no steps, and drift, lots of steps, no destination. When a team or an individual holds both, choices get easier. You know what to say yes to because you've defined what yes serves. One more theme threads through this section of the book: rehearsal and review. High performers don't rely on memory or mood. They create little systems. Before the work, they set expectations with a mental model. During the work, they keep a simple scoreboard so progress is visible. After the work, they reflect briefly: what matched the plan, what didn't, and what to adjust next time. That loop, plan, act, review, keeps motivation renewed, focus protected, and goals aligned with reality. It also keeps the process humane. You're not judging yourself, you're learning about your own attention and adjusting the conditions around it. The encouraging part is how ordinary these moves are. You don't need a new app or a radical routine. You need to repeatedly choose a starting point, narrate what you're about to do, and connect your actions to a meaningful outcome. Over time, those choices become second nature. You'll notice that you recover faster when your day derails. You'll notice that the tasks you used to avoid are easier to begin. And you'll notice that your goals stop living in documents and start showing up in your calendar and your shipped work. Duhigg's message is steady and hopeful. Motivation grows when you exercise control. Focus strengthens when you carry a clear story into complex moments. And goals become engines when vision and concreteness travel together. If you hold on to those principles, productive stops being a mood you chase and becomes a system you run. That's the foundation. In the next part of the book, he shows how the same logic scales to groups, how the right norms can turn a collection of individuals into a team that consistently delivers.
Section 2. Teams that win. Let's talk about what Charles Duhigg actually found when he dug into great teams. It isn't about packing a room with the smartest resumes. It's about how people interact once they're together. In the book, Duhigg highlights Google's multi-year Project Aristotle, which sifted through mountains of data and kept arriving at the same surprising answer. The biggest predictor of team effectiveness is psychological safety, the shared belief that it's safe to speak up, ask questions, admit mistakes, and take interpersonal risks without fear of embarrassment or punishment. When psychological safety is present, two simple behaviors tend to show up. First, people share talking time more evenly. No one person monopolizes the conversation, and quieter voices still get space. Second, teammates show high social sensitivity. They notice feelings, pick up on cues, and respond with basic empathy. Duhigg emphasizes that these are group norms, not personality tests. You don't need a team of extroverts or empaths. You need a culture where everyone expects respectful turn-taking and pays attention to one another. From there, other useful dynamics fall into place. Google's research, which Duhigg recounts, also points to 4 additional themes: dependability, people do what they say; structure and clarity, roles and plans are understood; meaning, the work matters personally; and impact, the work matters beyond the team. What's interesting is how psychological safety unlocks the rest. When people feel safe, they're more likely to flag risks early, boosting dependability. They'll ask for clarification instead of guessing, improving structure. And they'll connect the task to purpose because they're comfortable sharing why it matters to them, lifting meaning and impact. Duhigg's takeaway is encouraging. These are learnable norms. Teams can make them explicit. He describes small social signals, what he calls ostentatious listening, that help. Leaders and peers visibly taking notes, asking follow-ups, and acknowledging contributions. He also highlights the value of opening space for personal context, brief check-ins about how people are doing or what's on their mind. Not because meetings should become therapy sessions, but because recognizing the human on the other side lowers defensiveness and raises information flow. Once people feel seen, they contribute more and hide less. Another thread in the book is agency. Across chapters, Duhigg keeps returning to the idea that motivation grows when we feel a sense of control. In teams, that translates into giving individuals ownership over a piece of the mission and the freedom to exercise judgment within clear boundaries. Safety without agency can drift into pleasant stagnation. Agency without safety can turn into chaos or blame. The best groups blend both. People are safe enough to speak and empowered enough to act. Duhigg connects team performance to clear goals framed at 2 levels. Stretch aims focus energy and make the work feel meaningful. Concrete sub-goals turn that energy into coordinated action. When a team pairs a compelling outcome with specific near-term steps, members know why their work matters and exactly how to move it forward. Safety makes it comfortable to ask, what does success really look like? Clarity answers it in plain terms. Conflict, in his telling, isn't the enemy. In effective teams, disagreement is common and healthy because it's about ideas rather than people. Psychological safety lets colleagues challenge assumptions, test alternatives, and change direction without bruised egos. Duhigg notes that groups with safety don't avoid tough conversations. They simply separate critique of the work from judgments about the person. That boundary keeps curiosity alive and prevents the kind of silence that leads to late surprises. Focus plays a supporting role. Elsewhere in the book, Duhigg explains how mental models, brief stories we tell ourselves about what we expect to happen, protect attention under pressure. Teams use the same habit. Before diving in, effective groups sketch a quick shared narrative. Here's the plan, here's what might go wrong, here's how we'll recognize it, and here's how we'll respond. This collective preview reduces cognitive tunneling when stress spikes. People keep scanning, noticing, and adapting together. If there's a single managerial implication Duhigg wants you to remember, it's this: design the norms on purpose. Don't leave culture to chance. Make the expectations visible. Invite participation from everyone, not just the loudest. Ask questions that surface uncertainty. Acknowledge contributions publicly. Keep roles and next steps crisp so effort converts into output. And keep returning to meaning and impact so the work feels worth the stretch. The hopeful message is that none of this requires a personality transplant for you or your teammates. You don't have to be more charismatic or hire unicorns. You can start by naming the behaviors you want to see, modeling them consistently, and reinforcing them until they become the team's default. According to Duhigg, once a group experiences that shift, shared safety, clear goals, dependable follow-through, and a felt sense of purpose, performance stops relying on heroics and starts running on norms. That's the quiet engine behind teams that win.
Section 3. Decide smarter, learn faster. Now that you've tuned your day and strengthened your team, Duhigg turns to a quieter but decisive skill: how to choose well when the path isn't obvious, and how to turn every choice into fuel for learning. His message is encouraging. Good decision-makers aren't born with a special radar. They use a set of habits that make uncertainty workable. You can learn those habits, practice them, and get better over time. The first habit is shifting from certainty to probability. Instead of asking, "Is this right?" Duhigg shows that effective people ask, "How likely is this to work given what I know right now?" That small reframe does two things. It softens the pressure to be perfect, and it invites you to update your view as new information appears. In the book, this is a recurring pattern. Strong performers make explicit predictions, sometimes rough, sometimes very simple, so they can revise them later. When results come in, they don't treat outcomes as verdicts on their identity. They treat them as feedback on their assumptions. That's a much healthier, more productive stance. To make probabilities less fuzzy, Duhigg emphasizes the outside view. We all love our plans. We can explain in detail why our particular approach will work. But the outside view asks, what usually happens to efforts like this? That means looking for base rates, typical timelines, typical conversion rates, common failure modes, and using those as an anchor before you customize for your unique context. This simple step pushes back against overconfidence and keeps estimates tethered to reality. It's not cynical, it's protective. You're asking the world to keep you honest so your choices are grounded. Another tool he highlights is constructing multiple futures. When stress rises, our attention narrows. We fall into what Duhigg calls cognitive tunneling, fixating on one storyline and missing cues that don't fit. The antidote is to rehearse a few plausible paths before you start: a best case, a base case, and a worst case. You don't have to script everything. You just need a short narrative for each: what it looks like, how you'll recognize it, and what you'll do next. That way, when reality veers, you're not inventing a response from scratch. You're selecting from plans you've already considered. It's a kinder way to treat your future self. Clarity also improves when you predefine decision criteria. Duhigg's point here is practical. Decide in advance what evidence will matter most and what threshold will trigger a change. If you're choosing between options, name the 2 or 3 signals that will carry the argument and the time frame for reading them. This makes debate shorter and post-decision behavior more consistent because you're no longer arguing about feelings in the moment, you're checking against rules you agreed to earlier. Even simple criteria like, if we don't see X by Y date, we switch paths, convert uncertainty into action. Once a choice is made, Duhigg encourages active updating. New data isn't a confession booth, it's a clue. Ask which assumption just got stronger, which one got weaker. This keeps you flexible without becoming flaky. The goal isn't to pivot every hour. The goal is to stay responsive to reality so sunk cost pride doesn't trap you. When you treat decisions as draft documents meant to be edited with evidence, you move faster because you spend less energy defending yesterday's story. From decisions, the book flows naturally into innovation. Duhigg pushes back on the myth of sudden genius. More often, creative breakthroughs are combinations of the familiar and the surprising. We tend to prefer familiar surprises, something that feels known but arrives with a twist. Innovators in his telling build that effect by deliberately recombining patterns from different places. They gather a wider set of inputs, then look for ways to connect them. There's nothing mystical about this. It's a habit of exposure, read, watch, and listen widely, and a habit of synthesis. Ask how 2 unrelated ideas might fit together. He also spends time on disfluency, which is a fancy word for making thinking slightly harder on purpose. When the mind feels too smooth, when information flows past without friction, we tend to skim and forget. Introducing a little difficulty,
like changing the format, summarizing by hand, or forcing yourself to teach the concept, makes the brain engage more deeply. That doesn't mean creating confusion. It means adding just enough effort that understanding sticks. Duhigg shows that people who do this regularly avoid autopilot and produce clearer insights. Counterintuitively, constraints help here as well. When everything is possible, almost nothing gets finished. Useful limits, time boxes, resource caps, a narrow definition of done sharpen choices. In the book's examples, teams that commit to thoughtful boundaries don't get smaller ideas, they get clearer ones. Constraints push you to prioritize essentials, which is where originality often lives. All of this feeds into how we handle data. We live in a world with more numbers than ever, and Duhigg argues that numbers alone won't change behavior. What changes behavior is narrative sense-making, turning data into a story with cause and effect. The productive habit is to pair metrics with meaning: what happened, why it might have happened, and what we're going to try next. Which brings us to the final rhythm in this section: short, deliberate learning loops. Duhigg doesn't romanticize long postmortems. He prefers small, regular reviews that close the gap between intention and reality. The cycle is straightforward: plan, act, review, adjust. He emphasizes that you should schedule the review before the work begins and keep it honest but brief. One change per cycle is enough. Compounded over weeks, it's powerful. This habit transforms experience from something that just happens to you into data you deliberately harvest. If you zoom out, you'll notice how these ideas fit together. Probabilistic thinking invites humility. Your belief is a draft. The outside view keeps you anchored. Your plan is compared to what usually happens. Multiple futures protect your attention. You're less likely to freeze because you've already imagined alternatives. Decision criteria reduce noise. You know in advance what will count. Active updating keeps you honest. New facts change your stance. Recombination and disfluency keep creativity alive. Your brain works a little harder and connects more dots. Constraints focus effort. Finished beats perfect. Data stories drive movement. Numbers become next steps. And learning loops ensure that none of this is a one-off. You keep getting better because you keep closing the loop. The hopeful part is how humane this all feels. Duhigg isn't asking you to become a different person or to pretend you're certain when you're not. He's inviting you to adopt a mindset that treats uncertainty as normal and manageable. You're allowed to guess as long as you update. You're allowed to be wrong as long as you learn. You're allowed to change your mind because new evidence arrived. In a culture that rewards hot takes and fast answers, that approach is quietly radical. So if you're thinking, where do I start? Duhigg would suggest starting small. Before your next decision, name the outside view. Sketch a best, base, worst path in a few lines. Decide which signal will matter most and when you'll check it. After you act, spend 5 minutes comparing what you expected with what occurred. That's it. You don't need a heavyweight system on day one. You need a repeatable rhythm that turns choices into lessons. That's the spirit of smarter, faster, better. Not superhuman certainty, but everyday habits that raise your odds and compound your learning. Decide a bit smarter today. Learn a bit faster this week. The rest, better work, better teams, better outcomes, tends to follow.
When you step back from the stories and tactics of smarter, faster, better, a single idea comes into focus. Progress is less about squeezing more hours from the day and more about directing the hours you already have with intention. You now have a personal engine that begins with conscious choice, is guided by simple mental models, and is anchored by a ladder that connects stretch ambitions to practical, measurable steps. You've seen how teams accelerate not by pushing harder, but by creating the conditions where people speak up, share ownership, and refine the work together through clear intent and respectful challenge. And you've learned to approach decisions as living drafts, formed by probabilities and base rates, clarified by preset criteria, and steadily upgraded as evidence arrives. If this resonated, choose one idea and apply it before the day ends. Write a single stretch goal and 3 SMART steps. Run a 2-minute round robin in your next meeting, or frame your next decision with a brief outside view. Then tell us in the comments what you picked and why. Your reflection will help others act, and their ideas may sharpen yours. If you'd like more summaries that blend research, practical structure, and a voice that respects your time, subscribe and join us for new episodes each week. Next, we're exploring another book that reshapes how you work and lead. Until then, keep directing your attention with care, keep learning in public, and let the quality of your process compound into results you can be proud of.